You here today. Hopefully, you can hear me. Drop a little note for me if you can hear me. I am brand new back from being out and trying to make sure all my tech works. So, today we are going to talk about how you can use LinkedIn and other systems to connect to hiring managers. And here's the thing is there's always an option. There's always an experiment to be done, but sometimes there are consequences to those experiments that may not be great for our clients. So today we're going to talk about how you can decide what approach is best for you and your client and then how to execute it as best possible. We're always here on Tuesdays, bringing you the new and the next in careers on our Trend Tuesdays. If you're following along on LinkedIn, I hope you followed our company page. If you're on YouTube, where you can find all of these live videos, you can find them on YouTube under the live tab, and you can subscribe so that you get notified if we're going when we're going live. So let's chat about how we're using social media and for our job search and how we can do all of the ways, how we can try all the things that might give our clients an opportunity. So when I first started teaching, hello, good to see you. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Happy to have you here live. Okay, so when I first started teaching job search, we've been teaching our job search coaching class for, I don't know, almost 10 years now. And when we first started teaching it, I encourage people not to do cold connecting. Don't do cold connecting, don't do cold calling. Um, it's harder. Most people don't want to do it. It has a lower return on investment, et cetera, et cetera. And then I brought on Kimberly Spate, who helps me teach our job search coach class. And she had a different idea around it. She had a different approach, which is why I love learning from our community. And she said, cold calling can work and cold calling has a place. And there's an opportunity that some clients may have, depending on their industry, their personality, what they want to do, what they can do, what they feel comfortable doing. And sometimes our clients feel more comfortable with the cold approach. Maybe they're hesitant to contact their direct network for whatever reason. And so they want to do that cold approach. And I thought, you know what? I've always taught this as here's a menu, here's the options. Let's talk through what makes sense for you and why, instead of being prescriptive or overly directive, because that's not coaching, right? It's advising, and we do a little bit of that in our work. But the truth is, we work with all different kinds of people who are in all different types of industries and jobs, and there may be reasons that one approach or another works well for them, or they may be stuck and trying something new may help jar them into doing something different. So it's an option that we want to be able to share with our clients. How can they do this and how can they do it well? And nothing is ever an either or. So, what are the best tactics that we can take to do networking and outreach in a positive and productive way, whether it is warm or cold, or maybe a little bit of both, which we're going to talk about today. I'd love to hear from you in the chat. What are you doing with your clients? More warm outreach, more cold outreach? What are you doing for your clients? Warm or cold? You could just drop warm or cold into the chat. And you may be saying, Marie, what do you mean by that? For me, warm has always meant that you started with the people that already know, like, and trust you. They're your existing network. They're willing to make introductions for you. You don't have to get to know them, right? You're kind of speeding up the process by using that opportunity to talk to the people that already know, like, and trust you. Still a lot of benefit there, and it's still where I have people start. Both. I love that, Kathleen. Thanks for sharing. So that warm approach is where we're getting introductions from the people that already know, like, and trust us, where we're having conversations starting with that audience and using our tools, our strategy tools to improve those conversations because most people aren't having great conversations with their warm network. So we're using the strategy tools to improve those conversations, but we're really focused on that audience. And then cold approach is someone you've never met, never talked to, and you just reach out to them cold and try to get a conversation with them. And how can we do that, right? There's an opportunity there for sure. Kimberly always talks about doing cold calling, like actual cold calling, because if you can get someone on the phone, it's really hard for them to ignore you. And this is true, right? When someone calls you and you're talking to them, if they have a good approach, it works. What we're unfortunately used to is a lot of telemarketing, so we're set up to say no right away, and that's why having a good approach is so important. I was just seeing some of you talk about the messages that we get on LinkedIn that are these bots, they're scripted, they're so obvious even when they try not to be, and that's one thing that we have to be aware of when our clients are doing outreach, is that's what they're competing with. That's what they're immediately going to be seen as, are those cold outreaches. So how can we make that different? I'm going to talk about a few strategies that we can use to make cold calling more effective. Now, we're coaches. We're always thinking about how can we help our clients leverage strengths that they already have? How can we help them leverage experience that they already have so they realize that this isn't new? So, the first thing I would do if I was working with a client that said they wanted to do some cold outreach is ask them what experience they have with that already. So, have they ever had the opportunity to do cold outreach? How did that go? What strategies made it effective, et cetera? Or even being on the receiving end of that, what makes it effective when someone reaches out to you cold and you're willing to talk to them? What is it that makes that difference? What is it that helps warm it up? Because I can tell them all of my stories and my how-tos, but that's likely not going to connect to their experience, to their wisdom, to their style. So we really want to start there. When have they had an experience either doing it or receiving, and how can they learn from that? And I actually save cold messages that I get in LinkedIn, both the bad ones and the good ones that stand out on either end of the spectrum, so that I can use them as examples for myself and for others. And if I was working with a client that wanted to do some cold outreach via LinkedIn or whatever, I would encourage them to do the same. Start saving some of those messages that you get so that you can determine what works and what doesn't work when you're doing the cold outreach. And we've got scripts we can go through with them, and you can ask ChatGPT to write you an outreach script for a recruiter cold. And you can see what fits for you and what doesn't as you get those examples as well. One thing I'll say about cold outreach is that there's always opinions, right? We know this about our work. Recruiters say they hate it, recruiters say don't do it, recruiters say they love it, whatever. You can get any kind of opinion you want out there on whether to do it or not. That's really not what we necessarily want to drive our conversation, although it is important that our clients do a little bit of research, understanding their industry, understanding whatever platform they might want to use to do their direct outreach so that they're doing the best they can, but don't necessarily be discouraged by one opinion or another because they're just that, their opinions. Um, Yes, so some people prefer warm, some people prefer cold. It's really the opportunity for them to figure out what works best for them, or to perhaps experiment with a little bit of both, which is my favorite strategy. Because it is an experiment, there isn't a golden ticket, and I think if we can talk to people about that right away in their job search, it somewhat lets down the perfectionist problem. We're not trying to get it right, we're not trying to do the right thing. We're looking at all the options and we're figuring out what to do and how to make it the best it can be once we choose what we decide what to do. So if I'm going to outreach cold to someone, I've got to do my research and really understand what's the connection, what am I looking to ask, what are the opportunities for mutual understanding, and how am I going to make it obvious right away that I'm a human, that I'm not a bot, right? Now, my favorite strategy for cold outreach isn't really cold outreach, but if you have a little bit more time, I understand that the direct cold approach is fast. It has a potential to burn that end, right? It has a potential to burn that bridge. So if you have a lot of options and you don't care if you burn some bridges, that kind of direct cold outreach can be fine. if you have a little bit more time and maybe don't want to burn some of those bridges, I recommend doing a sort of a hybrid approach. And a hybrid approach goes back to what we've been talking about here in our little live stream series around getting on social media and engaging with people in the groups, in live conversations, finding out where they are active and getting involved in those conversations. That's the easier way to warm up when you don't have an introduction. So I could find out, is that person posting on LinkedIn? Are they posting on Twitter? Are they active on Instagram? Are they active in a Facebook group? Are they active in a professional association? So I could find other ways to connect with that person or people like them and warm up those conversations before I do a direct message, a cold outreach. And that is a kind of a middle ground to warm it up. Now, this is awesome on social media because I can have the opportunity to have a conversation, comment on their posts, comment on their comments, and reply on Twitter or comment on Instagram. We've got all these different platforms that we could engage on. Now, what we struggle with is that LinkedIn is really an on or off button for most people. Now, if you're looking to connect with recruiters, they may be more likely to be on LinkedIn, but maybe not. If you're looking to connect with hiring managers, like your actual colleagues or boss, it's highly likely they are not active on LinkedIn on a weekly basis. And so this is where we get into how do you find other ways to engage with them and warm up that conversation before you dive in and do the messaging. And so there's a lot of opportunity that we can help our clients explore for that warm up. How can we meet some of these people, get in their communities, engage with them before we do that cold outreach? That's my favorite way. However, if you're going to reach out cold, we have a little cold connecting plan for you, of course, because this is what we do in all of our programs. And I'm just going to share this with you here. Let me see. This one is for LinkedIn. So in our social media for job search class, we go through how to do these things kind of step by step on LinkedIn. And we give you some ideas for this, but we also give you these checklists so that you can use them with clients and be able to go through that with the clients. So I can't see the comments for a minute while I go through this. So if you have a question or a thought, drop it in there and I'll get back to it in just a second. So this form goes through, how can you find people? Obviously, find people on company pages, on alumni pages, and you can use the search. We talked about the search last week. If you missed last week's live, go back to YouTube, catch it on the live tab, and we went through how to do some of that searching. You can also and then if you wanna engage with people before you connect cold, you can view their activity page, you can start to comment, you can see if there's groups that are active on LinkedIn. It's a little more challenging, but it happens sometimes. And you can, do some of the connecting pieces. So I put in the little comment formula that we talk about a lot where you connect, compliment, add your insights, and then ask a question to continue the conversation. Also some messaging. If you're gonna send the personalized invitation, there are some opportunities to experiment with not sending the personalized invitation. For instance, if you just wanna experiment and see, there are some studies that show people accept those non-messaged invitations. I wouldn't recommend it. I like having a personalized message of this is how we met or this is why we're interested. Unless you're connecting with a recruiter, you don't necessarily want it to be specifically about a job. If you're connecting with a recruiter and you know that they're open for that, they have a job opening, then you might want to be direct about it. Just depends on the situation. And then, of course, if they're not active on LinkedIn in the last month or so, you really want to email them and not try to message them on LinkedIn because it's not going to work. You're not going to get anything connecting with them cold on LinkedIn. So you've got to know, are they active or not and what matters. So here's what it comes down to. Cold calls work when you're selling what the other person wants, right? You think about it, anytime a cold call has worked for you to buy something or even to sell something, it's because you know exactly what your audience is looking for and you have a good connection, you have a good pitch, if you will. The same is gonna be true for our job seekers. It might kind of even put it in a dating analogy, right? They're not that into you, they're not that into you. It doesn't matter how you approach them. If they're into you and they're looking for someone that does exactly what you do, if they're hiring that open position and you connect to them and you actually are qualified, heck, it's gonna work, right? Because they're looking for someone with your skills. The challenge with job search, and especially with more networking types of conversations, is you have to approach it in a way that someone's going to want to respond because if you're talking to a hiring manager or a peer, they don't have that like pain of I need someone right now, like a recruiter might. So we've got to figure out why else would they want to connect with someone cold? What's in it for them to respond to me? And how can I formulate my message that way? And if I'm not able to do that, I'm probably not going to get a response. So those recruiters, if they're looking for someone like me, heck yeah, that cold call might work. The hiring managers or peers that we might want to network with on LinkedIn, we've really got to figure out that connection point for what really matters for them, what really is, what's going to open that door for us. Doesn't mean it can't work, but it is going to have a lower response rate than a warm message or a warm connection after we've connected in the community or in comments. But it's worth trying for clients that are up for it, that are interested in it, and that want to make that connection. Even better if you can make the connection first or make a connection in your request or find an opportunity to engage with them or as Kimberly teaches, to reach out with that cold call because it's really hard to ignore. So that's on LinkedIn. I just also quickly wanted to show you our Facebook one because we know that an opportunity to connect cold on many different platforms. And when I say cold, remember it's kind of hybrid, it's not really cold, but making sure that we're reaching out, we can find companies, we can find connections. It's a little harder on Facebook than LinkedIn, but you can find people. We can find groups, which is really the best place on Facebook to find groups that we might be able to engage in and meet people and figure out if there's individuals that are there. And then looking for opportunities to engage. Facebook is more groups than on your page necessarily, but it might give you an opportunity to engage in that group. Same thing, you're looking at the platform, you're engaging, and then you're sending that direct message when you've got the conversation started. And you can always use the similar process of finding their email if it doesn't feel appropriate to connect on Facebook. Wonderful thing about platforms like Twitter, um, and Facebook groups and Instagram, depending on the way the person's using it, is that it doesn't require that friend request that Facebook or LinkedIn require. So you can engage with them in the conversations and even send messages when you're not connected and gives you that opportunity to do this direct outreach, whether you're warming it up first or you're just striking out there and doing it cold. I hope that as you go through and talk with your clients, you can help them determine what cold approaches make sense. How can they leverage their existing understanding and perhaps experience with cold outreach, or start to do some study to figure out what's going to work best for them, and then go try it and see what happens. Realizing that, of course, there are cons, there are downsides, but there's also an opportunity to open some doors that maybe they couldn't open or couldn't open very quickly with the warm networking that they're doing. I love talking about this and going through the process with people and giving career providers new tools to do that. So we've got our social media class coming up here in this Thursday. We start this Thursday, and this is what we do. We go through the platforms. We go through how to use LinkedIn Jobs feature, how to do the strategic networking, how to do the cold outreach, how to do the searches that we want to do on LinkedIn. We talk about using hashtag strategies for research, both on LinkedIn and on Twitter, using Twitter lists. You give you tons of scripts. So we have pages and pages of scripts that we add to each time when people have other ideas or questions or suggestions. And then we talk about using Instagram and Facebook. How can you use those again? Because not everybody's on LinkedIn, not everybody's on LinkedIn Weekly. Well, most people aren't LinkedIn on LinkedIn Weekly. So there's other options for us to warm up those connections and be able to connect with people faster and better by using other tools that give us an opportunity to get connected and to learn about them and to have them learn about us in a less maybe a less forceful way than doing cold calling, although we'll tell you can use these platforms to do that as well. And then we really talk about the planning and tracking and execution because that consistency, just like for us in marketing, is where it's at when we're talking with our job seeker and being able to keep their job search going, even when it gets difficult and overwhelming. We have a process to keep them going and keep it structured. So that's where we're headed on Thursday. If you have questions about that class, let me know. I did send out our social media for job search checklist a few weeks ago and our emails. If you're not on our email list or you didn't see that for some reason, let me know and I'm happy to send you that social media for job search checklist. And then we'll be back next week talking more about the trends. We have some new trends that are coming around in jobs and the future of jobs. And so we'll be talking a little bit more about that. We'll look forward to seeing you back next week on the new and the next Trend Tuesdays for Career Thought Leaders. Thank you, everyone.